maybe a little
Okay,
over the
let's
there. We'll see how
bring
this one comes out
Colin
as we come back.
Liddell
And Jake, I just
onto
bring a
the
full
show.
statement, folks.
Colin, anything that you've seen or heard in the last few hours about the American election that has caught your attention?
Except that Trump seems to be edging towards victory. Not really, no. People expected that Trump's rather low energy campaign would probably backfire on him a bit more than it did. And the women vote was supposed to be mobilized against him, and we haven't really seen too much of that. So it kind of looks like Trump is squeezing over the line or limping over the line. And this is really because, the American deep state has been really quite deficient in its efforts to take him down. I think the American deep state has been proved to be kind of almost impotent, really, in the case of Trump's prospective second term.
And what were the thoughts in Japan? I have a sense that Japan and much of Europe and certainly Eastern Europe have expected a Trump victory for about a year now.
Well, that's because of Biden, because Biden was so senile and he was obviously so weak and he was hanging on so long. And of course, in Asia, they tend to respect the elderly. So they could understand why the Americans were apparently unable to shunt Biden aside until really much too late in the game. And so they would that would be the because of Biden. They weren't really too sure what to make of Harris, but I think like most people, most intelligent, rational, unemotional people, they kind of suspected that she would be a rather weak candidate, which she's turned out to be, because Donald Trump is not particularly strong. There's a lot of weak points in the Trump campaign, in Trump's message, and in the way he's been behaving and performing. He was obviously a lot fresher, more exciting as a candidate in 2016. Even in 2020, he wasn't that bad. It was a much simpler kind of anti-establishment message in those days. So basically Trump shouldn't be winning, but because the Dems fucked up with keeping an extremely senile and elderly Biden in place for too long and then replaced him at the last moment with possibly the weakest candidate, that's probably why they're going to lose tonight if the New York Times and other reliable metrics are functioning properly.
And Japan had a surprising election result where the ruling, I think it's called Liberal National Party, was dealt a severe blow. But what's the significance of the Japanese election? Was it 3 weeks ago?
There was an election in Japan. It hasn't really overturned the board just yet. I mean, the Liberal Democratic Party lost its majority. It remains the biggest party. Nobody else can really form a government. And so they're probably going to have to bring in another party as a coalition partner, because they have a pre-existing coalition partner, some sort of nutty Buddhist party. And so they'll probably just expand their coalition and then resume government in some form or other, possibly with a change of leadership, but that's not really essential. Interestingly, in that election, I noticed the Communist Party, in whom I take a particular interest in Japan, they recently changed their leader. They actually installed a female leader. And I noticed their campaign was really focusing on women's equality a lot. And they were trying to, in the same way that I guess the Harris campaign was doing, they were trying to make the female gender into this kind of oppressed class that could rebel by voting. And that wasn't particularly successful. I think the communist vote went down slightly. So there's a sort of faint echo of the Harris campaign in that.
And what would it mean for the Japanese-American relationship?
Trump's probably good for Japan, not so good for Europe. If Harris was elected, you see a kind of steady state foreign policy where America would, be a full partner in NATO, and that would probably reassure Europeans. Of course, the Democratic government, under Biden and Harris, they were pursuing a very cautious but conventional foreign policy, which wasn't really being very effective. I think with Trump in position, there's a lot of questions now about the Ukraine, about Europe. But I think Xi Jinping will probably be much more risk averse. He'll be a lot less likely to make a sudden move on Taiwan. So I think Trump makes Asia slightly more, or maybe quite a lot more secure. But it raises serious problems in Europe, possibly.
How worried are the Japanese, or at least Japanese elites, about a Middle East war that could, for example, double the price of oil?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think it all comes down to oil, and with American voters, oil is a major thing. I don't think Trump wants a Middle Eastern war because he knows that'll double the price of oil, and if that happens, whoever's in the White House is not going to be flavor of the month anymore.
What's going on with the Japan-South Korea relationship? That's always been a very sensitive one.
Oh, I don't think there's anything specific. It's usually the same old rubbish. They need each other, but they hate each other. That kind of thing.
And what kind of commitment does Japan have to Taiwan if Taiwan is invaded by China?
They do take that quite seriously, I feel. I think if that happened, I think Japan would kind of get sucked in. They have a lot of little islands quite close to Taiwan. There would be bound to be some sort of overspill. And the Japanese would then get very kind of worked up about that, I'm sure. And the Japanese have got quite a high-tech military. It can cause the Chinese quite a few problems. And there is a lot of under-the-surface nationalism, I would say. There's quite a few kind of covert organizations which view the world in ways that people in the West would find quite shocking and surprising. And they're quite well connected to the various centers of power.
And can you tell us about the new leader of the British Tory party?
Well, she's this very charismatic and personable black lady. She's obviously a lot smarter than the black lady the Americans are trying to experiment with politically. Basically, she's an anchor baby. I think her parents were working over in the UK, and they decided to drop her here and get the British citizenship in the bag. And then they carted her off to Nigeria to be raised. And then she came over, I think, when she was in her late teens, or I haven't really checked into the backstory in detail, but she came over quite late, and she seems to have been intelligent enough to assimilate to a certain degree. She married somebody with a Scottish name, and she managed to benefit from the Tory party's attempt to woke wash itself, which started under David Cameron. David Cameron decided that the Tory party looked too stale, male, and pale, and he decided that the way forward was to better represent the demographic breakdown of Britain. And so he decided that he had to boost the number of female and ethnic candidates. The Tory voters, as you can well imagine, were not too keen on this electoral strategy. So what they had to do, they had to parachute these kind of unpopular ethnic and female candidates into relatively safe conservative constituencies. And that meant that when the Conservative Party got booted out a few months ago, a lot of the people who survived in the Conservative Party, who survived the kind of nuclear winter, were these ethnic minority parachuted in candidates like Kemi Badenoch and James Cleverly, etc., who then went on to contest the leadership, and in Kemi's case, very successfully. Even the members seemed to be swayed, which I found a bit surprising. So I think, there's a lot of impetus behind Badenoch. I think certain interests got behind her to sway the normal members in a kind of surprising direction. Because even though Jenrick wasn't a particularly attractive candidate, I thought the kind of inherent racism of the Conservative membership would push him over the line, but apparently not. And I think having Kemi Badenoch as Conservative Party leader really is a kind of major structural flaw in the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party at this time, it's at a very low ebb. It lost an election. It's down to about 120 MPs. It's sort of, in a sense, tottering on the brink. And they need to basically finish off their main existential threat. And their main existential threat is the Reform Party. And by having a kind of black Nigerian woman as the leader, that's going to greatly bolster the chances of Reform surviving. And Jenrick's whole strategy was to kind of wipe out the Reform Party by being a bit more right-wing than the Reform Party. And if he had managed to do that for a couple of years, the Reform Party would have probably disappeared up in a puff of Kremlin smoke. And now we have Kemi Badenoch in. She has certain talents and abilities, and in a certain sense, she might even be quite likable as a leader. But looked at structurally, this will be a hard sell for the Conservative Party, and it will ensure that Nigel Farage's reform project has a bit of shelf life. And if that is still around when the next general election comes around, then I think we'll see quite a similar result. You'll have the natural right-wing Conservative majority votes being split into two ineffectual pockets, and probably Labour getting in again.
Now, Kier Starmer ran as a centrist technocrat, but he's governing as a leftist. Is that a fair description?
I haven't really made my mind up on that yet, but Rishi Sunak was governing as a leftist. I mean, look at the amount of taxation that exists in the UK. Look at the amount of government spending. Look at how much of the economy is tied to public services. I mean, basically, it's a semi-socialist country, and anybody who isn't rolling that back is effectively a socialist. So Kier Starmer isn't really that much different from what went before.
And the so-called right-wing riots have stopped, so he did appear to quash them. I expect, however, that they could return at any time, because Kier Starmer does not appear to have a strong popular hold on government. Right? He's not someone who is widely liked and respected.
Well, no. This is a ridiculously unpopular government that won a landslide. And it won a landslide because one theory I have is that the Russians effectively split the Conservative vote by creating Nigel Farage's, astroturfed Reform UK party, fully supported by GB News, this fake news channel, which is an obvious successor to Russia Today. And the British deep state, like the American deep state, was quite puny and weak and unable to really do anything effective against it.
Anything going on in the Middle East that's caught your attention? Israel's had a stunning run of success over the past 3 months.
Yeah, kudos to the Israelis. They've shown people how it's done. They've used a lot of this kind of high-tech weaponry that they get from America to take out a lot of key targets and key personnel. Hezbollah and Hamas, they look like complete idiots. I wouldn't underestimate Iran too much, though. I think Iran still have quite a few cards that they could play, and Israel can't really do too much against Iran, because if Israel goes ballistic on Iran, then that closes down the Gulf, and then that shoots up oil prices, and then that causes economic chaos. So, it's a kind of finely balanced geopolitical mechanism.
Yeah. Okay, Colin, great to talk to you. Anything else that you want to weigh in on before we say goodbye?
Just give me a quick update on the New York Times probability.
87% chance of Trump victory.
Wow, that sounds pretty much in the bag, doesn't it?
Yeah. You get $11 if you just put down $1 if you're betting on Kamala Harris.
I reckon what's going to happen is Joe Biden will refuse to leave the White House. It'll be January 6th in reverse.
Oh, man, this should be so much fun. There should be so much wailing and gnashing of teeth among the elites, particularly in the news media, but throughout our Western institutions.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Luke. Speak to you later. Bye.
Take care, man. Thanks, Colin. Great to talk to you. All right, that was a lot of fun.